good evening, and welcome to How We Got Our Bible. This is our summer Bible study series at the Salvation Army in Alamance County, North Carolina. And I'm grateful that you've joined us. And we've been taking time this summer to try and understand where our Bible came from, how we got it, and is it reliable? Is it trustworthy? We've been trying to understand all those things this summer. And so we've talked already about canonization. We've talked about what books are in the Bible, the people that wrote them, what they're about. We've talked about all those things. And last week we talked about the Old Testament transmission of the Bible. We looked at the Old Testament and said, well, how can we be sure that the copies we have of the Old Testament today, the original kind of Hebrew copies, how can we trust that they are good and trustworthy? And so we talked about all of that last week. And I'd invite you, we've put a playlist together if you want to go and get caught up to go check that out. But we want to look this week at the transmission of our New Testament. And so we're going to start looking next week at the idea of translation. That is to say, how the Bible got into English so that we could read it, or the other languages it's translated into across the world. But for right now, in talking about transmission, we're just talking about how those kind of original Greek and Hebrew texts got transmitted down through the centuries. And so we're starting tonight by talking about autographs. And an autograph, we think of an autograph as like somebody's signature, but an autograph in the days the New Testament was being written, that refers to the original text, the thing that Paul signed with his own hand. And New Testament writers might have had people called amanuenses, and those were people that were in charge of writing down the literal words for you. And so you might recite the letter and they'd write it down for you. And so they might have had somebody else physically write down the letter. But whatever that original piece of paper was, that's what we call an autograph. And an important note for us is that we don't have any original autographs left. All of those autographs, they're written on papyrus. They're kind of brittle and fall apart over time. And so we don't have an original copy of any of our New Testament books. And so what we want to talk about is then, well, what is it that we do have copies of, and why do we feel confident in those copies? And so we're going to do something a little strange and might seem a little backwards to you, but we're going to talk about how we have confidence in our New Testament, in our Greek New Testament, because of its errors. We're going to start by talking about the errors that we find in the New Testament. The New Testament was copied by hand for more than 1,000 years. And the oldest Greek copies of the New Testament had nothing broke them up. They didn't have chapters and verses. Chapters and verses are added much later for our convenience as we try and look things up and talk about Scripture together. But they didn't have chapters and verses. They didn't have like paragraph breaks. They didn't have sentence breaks, like how we use periods to break up a sentence. And they didn't even have spaces between words. It's just a long string, a block of text. Here's my letter. And they were meant to read that and understand that. And so our oldest copies have none of these things. Now, this can create a lot of errors when you think about how that's transmitted and understood through the centuries. And so one of the things we'll look at, and I'll put a little example up through the magic of modern technology, but we might have a phrase like this, and I might ask you, how do you translate that? How do you understand that? How do you break that up? As you're making your copy into more modern English, how do you break this up so that it makes sense? Or how do you understand this phrase? And some of you might have said, I saw abundance on the table. Wonderful. But some of us read this and saw, I saw a bun dance on the table. And so there are all kinds of little things that can crop up and confuse us and cause little errors here and there based off of just this idea that the whole thing was just one big block of text in Greek. Other things that caused errors were things like missing lines, where maybe as you're copying by hand one long block of text, we have some manuscripts today that are missing lines. where probably the original document they copied, as it went from line down to the next line, down to the next line, maybe one word ends one line and starts another line 2 lines down, and so the person loses their place and skips a line in the middle somewhere. Another common type of error we see is with abbreviations, where people, when you're hand copying the whole New Testament, you look for places where you can copy a little faster. And so we see different abbreviations pop up in the text, or we see where different abbreviations get confused with other abbreviations, or later people aren't sure what those original abbreviations were meant to represent. And so all these things kind of introduce errors into our New Testament manuscripts. And so the question is, how can we look at our New Testament manuscript and feel confident in what we have? How can we feel like we're certain this is the Greek word of God? And a lot of people will look at the New Testament and they'll look at the fact that we don't have these original documents, and they'll try and come up with different conspiracy theories and things to say, oh, well, you can't trust that document. But there is one key thing that I think is what helps us understand that we can have a lot of confidence in our Greek New Testament. And that thing is that we have today over 5,000 Greek New Testament manuscripts. So we have over 5,000 copies of the New Testament that were hand copied over a 1,000-year period between when these letters were written and when the printing press came out, and we could really solve a lot of those errors by making a lot of copies all at once. And so over 1,000 years, when all these books are being written, we have over 5,000 copies from all different kinds of time periods of this Greek New Testament. And so we're able to take those and compare them to one another. And so in answer to the question, well, how do we know our New Testament is reliable? How do we know that we have something that closely mirrors the original autograph? How do we know we've got the right book here? And the answer is that through comparison, we find confirmation. That is, we compare New Testament books from different ages and eras of the copying of this book, and we go back to our earliest manuscripts, and we're able to see where these things match together. And so, yeah, we might come up with a copy over here where we say, oh, well, this line's missing from this one, or they've interpreted this word differently, or they broke this up differently. But as we look at 5,000 manuscripts as a group together and are able to compare and contrast things, we're able to find those manuscripts that we believe are exceedingly accurate. We're able to prize earlier manuscripts where we say this is closer to the time of the original autograph. And so we're able to come up with something that we feel like is a really good rendition of the Greek New Testament. And so that produces certain books, modern books that we can look at that are written in Greek, that are written in Koine Greek. This is ancient or classical Greek. And so we have certain books we can look at that are modern books that are a rendition of the ancient Greek text, where they have tried as best as they can to take all these different manuscripts and bring them together to say, what did the original New Testament text look like? And here's what we believe it looked like. And we have a couple of texts we can look at. The Reformers in the 1500s, around 1530, they came up with a text called the Textus Receptus. And really, it's probably better said that they found the text or reintroduced the text. But they took Erasmus Textus Receptus, or that's translated received text. And they found this text of the New Testament, and they were able to kind of pull that together and put out a book. And again, by 1530, we have this printing press. So they're able to make lots of copies of a Greek New Testament called the Textus Receptus, and send that out all over the world so that the church all around the world has a really good Greek copy of the New Testament. And we're no longer working off of, well, you've got kind of an old Greek copy and he's got an old Greek copy, and we can all have one Greek New Testament together. And that's actually, by the time things like the King James Bible come along, that's what they use to translate. So the Textus Receptus is coming together, looking at all these texts from across the world and saying, this is what we feel like is a really accurate version of the New Testament. But we also have other people coming along and translating. We'll talk more about translation later. More modern translations of our Bible use more modern renditions of the Greek New Testament. And what happens is as archaeology and research turns up older and older copies, older and older manuscripts of these New Testament books, we're able to go back and kind of adjust some things in that Greek text to be able to bring in scholarship that represents the way these books have been copied earlier and from vastly different places to say, let's have a really good copy. And so a lot of newer translations of the Bible rely upon what's called the Novum Testamentum Graece, which is a book you can buy today. It's a Greek New Testament. And it's, again, where they've taken all the best manuscripts and tried to bring them together to form a document that we believe very closely matches the original autograph. And so just a final thought about our Greek New Testament, the way the New Testament is transmitted down through the centuries, is that we have, through comparison, we find confirmation. That's the big thing I would highlight when we say, well, how do we know this is right, or how do we know whatever? It's because we have people with copies of this book from very early on in vastly different parts of the world, and we're able to take those two copies and match them up together and see that they agree with one another. And when we find a copy that disagrees, we're able to look at what the vast majority of those 5,000 copies of the New Testament in Greek look at and what they look like. And so we're able to come up with a New Testament document in which we can have a lot of confidence. And so that's how our New Testament is transmitted. And next week, we're going to start talking about translation. That is to kind of move from how we got a Greek New Testament into the 1500s to how we end up with an English New Testament that you and I can read. And so we'll start looking at that next week. And I thank you for joining us, and may God bless you. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.